Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Leadership Lounge. We are powered by TDL and we're bringing a community of like-minded people together, focusing on their future leadership. We're speaking to like-minded people with amazing stories and experts in their field. So if you haven't already and you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you hit subscribe. On recording this, we've just gone over 300 subscribers. So these little marks of figures and these algorithms now that I'm learning about ex-military are earmarks and targets to aim for. So thank you very much. If you're listening to us on your podcast provider, make sure you hit follow. And as ever, let us know what you get from each episode and each guest. So today we're speaking to Jonny. How are you?
Really good. Start the day as I usually do, sort of a bit of fizz, and I think that sets you up. And I think I'm probably on my 10th brew of the day, and it's not even lunchtime.
Yes, I love that. You saying brew has a little bit of an inkling of your background as well, because I keep saying brew and people are like, what's this? You talk about a brew, because I'm a brew sort of, I don't drink coffee, so I always got a brew. We'll dig into that. So I came across Jonny on LinkedIn, as a lot of my connections and podcast guests are nowadays. Similar military backgrounds, and we'll ask you a little about that. But you've got a link, as if you're watching on YouTube, you can see Veterans in Politics. We've only had a couple of episodes so far about politics. And I really like what you're doing, how you're positioning, how you're talking about it. I like the idea of it. And I wanted to have you on. And you've got a couple of other things going on, which we will chat about as well. So, Jonny, as I hit the 20-minute timer, if the people don't know who you are, what you do, give us a little bit of an introduction. Off you go.
Well, I kind of front myself up as the veteran in politics, and my call to most decent people is stand up and serve again, because I have spent a career working behind the scenes of politics for many well-known figures. So I work with a great MP called Grant Shapps, who's currently a Secretary of State. So he's one of the amazing people I've worked with. But I've also worked with the good, the bad, and the ugly of politics, so particularly in local government. And it was my observation, working and looking across the parties, that those in our politics simply weren't good enough. They kind of lack the minerals, they lack the values, they lack the skills in many places as well. So my professional background of working behind the scenes of politics, it has really driven me today to do something about it. But running alongside this political career that I've run sort of from my late 20s has been a military career, having first joined the Army back in 1996, serving my first operational tour at the age of 18 in Northern Ireland. To then, I felt this real urge to rejoin the military when Afghanistan was happening. So I re-enlisted, and guess what? Yeah, you end up somewhere hot and sandy. So those kind of two parallel careers of the military and politics have now come together in what I call this stand up serve again mantra, and starting up Campaign Force, and not for profit.
Yeah, amazing. So how did leadership turn up in your military career? Tell us a little bit about the evolution, what you were involved with, and how leadership. Actually, I like that good, bad, and ugly, because I think that comes out in all walks of life. So how would you sort of explain your leadership journey in the military?
I think people will perceive the armed forces to be quite hierarchical, and they're right in that assumption, because you have rank structures, you have inbuilt the class system in our country is still across our armed forces as well, and we have seen some changes. So we see more people from different social or economic backgrounds becoming officers, for example. So there's definitely been some positive step forward with that, but it has an impact on leadership that we experience, whether that be in basic training or at the unit level. But I actually found that a bit of a dichotomy in my experience, because when you go on operations, the leadership style was changed from the situations that present themselves. So I found that leadership style, rather than being a hierarchical top-down approach to leadership that you experience in the United Kingdom in peacetime, when you're actually on operations, it's far more lateral. And I found that people at a lower level are empowered more, and that depends on the culture and leadership style of those that are sort of one up and two up above you, and so it's a bit of chance, but that kind of approach to operations, because at the end of the day, if you've got the enemy facing you, then the rank structure is not really going to be the thing that you will fall back on half the time. It's going to be the person that's there in the moment and their ability to lead a situation, and that might often be the lowest ranked person in that team. So I've seen some phenomenal examples of leadership at a lower level. I think I became a better leader because I was empowered by a really good chain of command, because I was isolated. I was on my own. I was working as a linguist, an interpreter attached to a unit. So I didn't have anyone really there on my shoulder telling me what to do. I was kind of trusted, empowered, and I think that's really where my leadership style started to develop within that operational environment.
Yeah, amazing. And I kind of talk about this with ex-colleagues, and I can't remember whether it's come up on the podcast. I think it has a couple of times, but I'd like to, what's your thoughts on this? So I think the military they're put on a pedestal for leadership because it is that, as you said, when it's sandy, deserty, or is on the battle, or something's gone, leadership is from, I've not had experience myself, but I know it's phenomenal. It is phenomenal. When you're back in the UK peace times, everybody is on their leadership journey when it's not situational frontline. So there is a variety, let's say, of leadership styles, abilities across all ranks. What are your experience? Because I said in my sort of story that I think leadership has evolved in the 12 years I did. It's gone from dictatorship, there's one way of telling people how to do weapons drill, for example, and we're going through that evolution of everybody's got different learning styles, everybody's got different abilities, skills. Did you experience that shove, that nudge in the right direction of inclusivity in leadership journeys?
I was really lucky that I had an amazing mentor when I was 18 on the streets of West Belfast, and I've spoken about him before, a guy called Corporal Andy Shaw, who was one of the most streetwise individuals, quietly spoken. Don't get me wrong, he was tough from the streets of South London. So there was a slight, as an 18-year-old, slight menacing aura to him as well. But he was really softly spoken. And what I witnessed, so what I actually saw, the leadership style I saw and experienced was kind of a bit of tough love, quite frankly. But then when he was actually on the streets, his ability to communicate, use body language effectively, despite being faced with a crowd of young drunk people, he was able to control situations using communication as a leadership style that wasn't necessarily fit the bill of the military hard edge leadership style. So he could kind of switch on and switch off those styles, but overall it was a really good mentoring, nurturing style. And when I went through training, I was actually suffered a minor form of bullying from one of my instructors. And I always thought, well, if I'm ever in a situation where I become an instructor, which I have been, that's exactly how I'm not going to do it. Because in that classroom environment where you've got lots of information to take on, you're getting tested, you're under exam conditions, the last thing you need is someone to come in shouting and bawling. So that's going to you're going to just withdraw and you're not going to perform. So that leadership style for me has been very much nurturing, but at the same time knowing that, if you get across that line, then you can deploy a more tougher stance if needed. So don't take liberties with my style. Don't take that as a signal for you to be able to take advantage of me, because that's certainly not going to be the case. So how you carry yourself, how you communicate is really important, but you've got to back that up with action. So if you're going to say you're going to be an empathetic leader, if you're going to say you're going to nurture, mentor, and then one of your students on a course comes to you and says they're struggling and you haven't got time for them because you're too busy, you're going to do something else, you can't back that up. You've got to be able to then say, right, stop, let's talk that through, and do that mentoring piece. So I think for me, it's what I saw, and then I became, and then hopefully I pass that style on to other people as they've seen it too.
Yeah, I like that. And again, it adds that self accountability, isn't it? About that, check yourself sometimes about what you've said over what you're showing and presenting to others. So I like that. Can we pinpoint when politics started to come into your sort of thought process? How far back was that?
Probably goes back to my teenage years. I'm from a very a working class background in my family. Indeed, I was the first person from my family. I've probably heard this before. I was the first person to go to university. I was literally the first person from my entire family to have gone to university. And but I think early on, my dad, he just cared. He came from Southeast London. He'd experienced as a child poverty. He would, had gone on that social elevation journey with my mum, took the family out of London, made our family, moved themselves from difficult situations, so the socio-economic situations. So I think you see that. So you witness, again, going back to that thing, what you see. If you see your family working hard, you see your family struggling, if you see your family trying to do better, then that's politics, quite frankly. And my dad was very politically engaged. We'd sit up and watch Question Time as kids. I come back from the cadets, and that's when my military story started. And we'd stay up and watch Question Time. Or David Frost, my political hero, the broadcaster, famous, of course, from the Nixon interviews. He would be someone that I was just captivated by when he would speak truth and get the best out of his interviews from politicians. So that it was kind of nurtured at a young age. But did I ever think that I would go and work for a member of parliament? People like me, from my background, don't know anyone in politics. Absolutely not. So really by chance I fell into politics and applied for a job. Just asked the question, could I stand up and serve a game myself, or be it behind the scenes of politics?
It's, I love that. I love that. Sometimes I do say, like, how did that, if you were to tell yourself like 10 years ago, 50, however long it ago was, you were doing what you're doing now, it's pretty eye-opening when you get to speak to people that are in those positions. So tell me about tell me some stories about how the veteran community is starting to engage in politics, because the reason I got you on was because I see it as a massive positive thing. Some of you mentioned before about the values, how people are holding themselves, the beliefs, the values, behaviors over what we see, without going too political. Tell us some stories about how that's currently happening, because I think there's not a lot of people that know about it. Obviously, we have a connection into veteran communities, and we do know some people. I've got some people earmarked to be coming on the podcast, sharing some of their stories, because they're in the thick of it. But tell us a couple of things about what are happening with the veteran politics now.
Well, it goes back to that point about what you see. So I saw some really good examples as I was becoming frustrated working behind the scenes of politics. I was becoming a bit disillusioned, quite frankly. I actually saw myself as part of the problem because I was really good at my job. I was producing crap politicians. That's not Grant Shapps, by the way. He's absolutely amazing. But certainly in local government, I was good at my job, but you can only work with the candidates that you see in front of you. But we saw some really good examples. So the likes of Dan Jarvis in Labour, a former parachute regiment officer who's well liked and respected across the House. Johnny Mercer, famously, as our veterans minister, a veteran of Afghanistan, 3 tours of Afghanistan. So starting to see these characters in our contemporary politics. But if you wind it right back through history, Churchill, had a long career in the military, and you just pick your way through these waymarkers of post-war period. We had whole generations of MPs that literally helped rebuild Britain at its worst time, at its lowest point. World War One, I've evangelized about the backgrounds of many of the MPs that were killed in World War One. Ian Fleming, the creator of James Bond, his father, when Ian Fleming, I think, was just 5 years old, was an MP and died on the Western Front. So what you see are these figures throughout history and in contemporary times that are actually good, effective politicians, leaders in our communities. And then what I then saw and experience from working behind the scenes was a complete void of leadership, a complete lack of skills, some lack of values. And we don't need to bang on about what we've seen around values. We've seen bullying become an increasing topic to talk about in politics. I've experienced bullying in politics myself. We see all the different scandals, from the expenses scandal right now around values-based decisions, doing the right thing. And that was not what I was seeing in the armed forces community. Don't get me wrong, there's some wrong-uns that pop up every now and again, and we tend to hound them, and as does the media when they pop up. But by and large, some pretty decent people in the armed forces, quite frankly, who have given the best years of their life and faced some pretty tough decisions and situations. And I saw industry embracing that opportunity to solve commercial problems by tapping in, because I worked at the MOD for 3 years as part of that process of getting, as a civil servant, getting veterans into commercial opportunities. So I thought, why on earth is no one? We've got this problem staring at us in the face. We've got these great examples through history, contemporary examples from Dan and Jonny. So let's do something about it. And I thought, well, God, if it's not me, then who?
Exactly. I love that.
So that's why I stood up and served again and started Campaign Force.
So I just thought, as you were talking then, it's really inspiring listening to you talk about it as well. Just backs up why I wanted to have you on. Do you think, just to move on to something else to finish the episode off, do you think we'll see a veteran PM at some point in the future? That's a big question.
Big question. Well, they've got to stay elected first and foremost. So there's going to be a general election in the next year or so. Mm-hmm. And so there's some really good, talented MPs who may or may not be in government. At the moment, obviously, we have the blue team. There's a realistic possibility it could be the red team. And there are some good veterans I know standing as parliamentary candidates in the red team who no one has even heard about. Some have come on the podcast. And there are some people in the yellow team too, who are phenomenal. One of my community is standing in local government, having listened to the Veterans in Politics podcast and hearing the stories of others. That's inspired her to stand up and serve again. So there's a whole generation. This is this Iraq-Afghan generation, right? We're in our 30s, 40s, and 50s. We're taking over the mantle from the Falklands War generation at the moment, as we speak. Could we see a PM? I think we had Dennis Healy served in the military, Anthony Eden. So we have had PMs that have served in the military, but it's been a long time. Yeah. We could do. And that's a proper politician's answer, isn't it? If you're asking for a name, big fan of Dan Jarvis, big fan of Johnny Mercer. So on both sides of the house there, I think they're empathetic leadership styles. They're quite visionary, but then they back it up as well with their values and their actions as well. So there's a load of potential from this cohort. And we saw Tom Tugendhat, of course, go for leadership of the Conservative Party during that race. And he definitely fronted up his military experience as part of his sell to the Conservative membership.
Excellent. And I've got a feeling we might be sending some invites out onto the Leadership Podcast on this one. So I want to finish the episode off talking about you again, okay? Because we chatted and caught up just before we did this episode about some amazing things you're getting involved in. So I don't want to steal your thing. Can you tell us about that amazing experience you're currently having and you're going to do, and why it's come to fruition and what it is?
So from a pretty unamazing experience of having a motorcycle accident 4 years ago, 7 surgeries, a mental health injury, 3 bouts of therapy, infections, nearly losing my leg, and not working for 4.5 months, whilst at the same time becoming a parent and COVID-19. Perfect. I decided to start a business and a not-for-profit around about that time as well. But coming out the other side, so I have experienced trauma. But now the other side of that is this post-traumatic growth period that I feel that I'm in, to be able to really lead Campaign Force as a campaign cross-party, to be able to start my own business, the Great Campaigns Company with my wife, but to be able to put my hand up and apply to be part of Team UK for the Invictus Games, of which I'm massively proud to say I'm a member of, to go to Düsseldorf this year to compete in powerlifting, rowing, and indoor cycling. So yeah, that's been a whole process, and I think I wouldn't have been ready for this about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. But thanks to the Royal British Legion and their running of it, and the Invictus Games Foundation, the opportunity has arisen. And out of, I think, about almost 1,000 people expressed interest, hundreds applied, 59 of us are off to Düsseldorf. And I think running behind all of this, I've spoke about that adversity. Sport has been my thing. CrossFit. I've got to mention CrossFit. CrossFit has been the gateway of getting a bit of me back. It's provided me with the community to be more resilient. You can't be resilient on your own. You can't top up your resilience levels to face bad situations without a community, whether it be family, the armed forces, or a gym. So my CrossFit gym, then training, has been amazing as part of that journey, and it gave me the confidence to get out there and apply for the Invictus Games. But whilst you're fitter, more energy, more focus, post-traumatic growth, stronger, means I can be more effective in business, means I can be more effective with campaign force. So I owe sport a huge amount of gratitude for that and the people that have supported me. And then alongside that, I take it very, very seriously, the responsibility of having that Union flag on my chest, representing my country once again. And that's why I'm getting out there to talk about this to schools, to young people, to cadet units, because I think that's really part of the deal, to inspire others to get over difficult times, whether it be through sport, the creative arts, however you're going to do it. There are these things available for you to get over times what are really bad that I've faced.
Yeah, amazing. We have had somebody on the podcast, Scotty Simon, who has been part of the Invictus Games. So when he came on, it was very much to do with his involvement in the Olympics and coaching and high-end sports. So I wanted to have that element in because it's so phenomenal. He talks very highly about how humbling it was, what such a great experience it was. To finish off, if somebody's listening to this now and we're able and privileged enough to have it across a lot of veteran communities, people feel inspired or they want to pass this on to somebody that they know might want to listen to this, what's the next step for somebody to be going, I like the sound of that, I can get on board with that, what can they do?
So if you want to get involved in politics, do, because if you don't, it's them. Things won't change. We've seen our biggest enemy at the moment in politics is apathy. We've seen from 1979 through to the big elections in 1997 with the Blair election, Thatcher, Blair. Gradually, the percentages of turnout have dropped year on year, and that's what they want, because nothing will change, and that is despite the increase of things like digitization. So the engagement opportunities there, and political engagements everywhere, you can't move for it, but the engagement at the ballot box is really small. But that means we need to be inspired. We need to give people a reason to vote, and we can't leave this to the political parties alone. I don't care what political party you're part of, or just it's a vehicle, it's the enabler, or even if you stand as an independent. Very tricky in a general election, but certainly possible in local elections. So I would just say stand up and serve again. Come and speak to me. I will share my black book is your black book. My knowledge and experience, we have courses, etc. Is there to grab hold of it, because nothing will change. What we're trying to create here is a virtuous insurgency. We want to get within with good people, and that includes the other uniformed services. So it's not just restricted to the armed forces community, of which I evangelize over. So stand up and serve again. Stop throwing pillows at the TV. You'll run out of pillows, and actually do something about it. Otherwise, nothing will change.
An amazing way to finish a podcast. Thank you so much. So if you're inspired by that, make sure you hit Jonny's links below on the podcast show notes, all across social media. Make sure you reach out and connect and ask those questions and get involved. So Jonny, thank you so much again.
Absolute pleasure.
As always, so if you've listened to this on the YouTube channel, make sure you hit subscribe. If you're listening to us as you go by your day on your podcast provider, make sure you hit follow. And as ever, next week, Wednesday, 6 a.m., another amazing episode will be coming out to add value to your leadership journey. Speak to you soon. Take care. Bye.